Welcome to a Dead Squirrel in the Woods Productions. This is a bonus content episode. We can be found on YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. If you like this, please be sure to subscribe, and you will be notified when any new episodes come out. Thank you for joining us.
So now, on a personal note, I will be doing my best to keep up with the releasing of episodes on Friday, but if there is not a new installment some weeks, this is going to be due to my schedule filling up a little bit from community theater. I have been cast in a musical at the Sheboygan Theater Company, so if you are in the area, if you do live around Sheboygan, we're doing the show Crazy for You, and it will be running from May 12th to May 20th. So with practices and learning parts and music and dances, that's a lot extra on my plate. So there is a possibility that I will not have time to keep a consistent schedule, and there might be a day or two delay getting an episode out. I might end up having to do it on the weekend, so just be patient with that. And also some more adventures to come. In the middle of April, me and my sister Callie are going to be doing the haunted scavenger hunt at the Glen Beulah High School. And then also we are going to do a ghost hunt at the Sheboygan Asylum this month as well. And I have also volunteered to lead tours at the Sheboygan Asylum this summer. I am looking forward to this adventure and hoping to get some good bonus video content recordings for the podcast this summer, of just me at the site. So that's some exciting news. And with that done, let's get to this week's episode. This week, the accounts of this event coming from Wauwatosa, a suburb of Milwaukee, and this happened on November 10th, 1975, comes from the Pine Barns Institute. And at the time, the population was about 60,000 in Wauwatosa, a decent size for the big city close to it. It was a cool, crisp Monday night in Wauwatosa on November 10th, 1975, when Annie Iblees, she was 59, and her husband Peter, 64, were in their nighttime routine prior to going to bed. They were closing curtains, locking doors, stuff like that before you go to bed, the tasks you do before settling in for the night. Now, as it got close to 8 p.m., the couple talked about their day and what was going on for the week. So pretty much it seemed like an ordinary Monday. Well, that is until 7:50 p.m. that night. It was as if something in an unknown way made the clock and doorbell link together. The doorbell startled the couple. Now, this confused the couple. Who would be coming at this hour? At this point, Annie went to the door to see who it was. Annie pulled back the curtain to see what the source of the doorbell was. You can never be too safe. So, I like to know what I'm answering when the door rings too. So in this case, she was looking for the identity of a person, when it appears she was actually checking for a creature instead. What Annie saw was weird, one would say. An odd-looking person wearing a hat, but something was just off about the whole thing. Now, Peter, with a concerned voice, inquired, "Who was it?" And Annie said she was not sure. Peter stood silent as his wife opened the door. Annie had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of the door. The heavy wood door now opened all the way. Annie could see the figure on their porch in entirety. Annie assumed that it was a person, but it was nothing like she expected. Standing in front of her was something that resembled a man in shape, but it was not a man. The stranger seemed to be wearing long, dark clothes with what seemed to be an old straw hat. There were random patches of what kind of looked like unkept hair sticking out, and a dark brown face covered with deep grooves that was reminiscent of smoked meat. Like anyone else, Annie gasped and looked and locked the screen door. That was between them and between her and whatever it is that was on the other side. Now, not to get any more creepy, but I guess it's unavoidable. The stranger stood motionless without saying a word. It was holding a white staff, or what appeared to be a white staff. Annie was frightened at this point, and she backed up and asked the stranger who they were, which was answered with silence. So now, being even more cautious, she backed up again and asked, only to get, well, you guessed it, no response. Probably unnerved, she called her husband to take care of this. When Peter was close to her, she told him he doesn't talk, then proceeded to get as far away from the stranger. When Peter made it to the door, he unlocked the screen door and took a step outside. He was determined to show that this was his house, and he was ready to force him to leave. The visitor just stood motionless with the staff in hand, unfazed. It only took a few steps for Peter to be directly in front of the visitor. Now, this irritated Peter, that this visitor was still silent, so he said, "What the hell is this? Something left over from trick or treat?" After this, the visitor moved slightly. This movement allowed Peter to see the mouth of the visitor, and he would describe it as puckered and about the size of a dime. Its mouth sat a few inches above its pointed chin. Seeing this startled Peter into taking a few steps back, and he was sure this was real and not a costume. So Peter realized he was not dealing with what he thought you could say was a person. So even though I'm sure this frightened him, he attempted to remove the stranger with force. Now, this is where it gets a little weird. When he started to move closer to the visitor, it raised its staff, hit it back on the ground to create a clicking sound, and then began moving backwards. Now, when I say move backwards, when we move backwards, you would think like he just took some steps backwards, right? That's normally what it is. Well, no. The visitor did not use his feet. He rose from the ground and floated above and glided backwards. The creepy part is it never lost eye contact with Peter. Now, as the visitor held the staff and floated to the street, Peter saw more of the features of the creature. The hands were disfigured and looked claw-like. The legs bent backward and bowed out at the same time. At this point, Peter was in complete shock, and Annie, who was still watching from in the house, rushed to pull her husband back in the house. But as she was reaching to the door, she saw 4 more visitors that looked just like the one that had been at their door. The couple, now standing side by side, watched the stranger gather in the road, and it seemed like forever. The visitor that rang the doorbell raised its staff to acknowledge them, and all 5 floated away. According to Peter, one of the 5 appeared to be able to float much higher than the others. Another looked to be bouncing as it moved, like walking on the moon. Now, with the group gone, Annie pulled Peter back in the house. Now, after some time, the couple sat in their living room trying to recall the experience they just had, but they were having issues recalling all the details. One thing they both agreed on was they compared the visitors as oversized gnomes. This left them in a weird place, not sure if what happened was real or a dream. They, however, did have something weird happen, so they felt it necessary to contact the police. An officer was sent to the house, and they told the officer there was an attempt to find the strangers or visitors, but the police saw no one matching that description. Whatever it is that Annie and Peter experienced is something out of the ordinary. Was it an alien encounter? Was it a dream? What was it? But they came forward, so they are under the belief they were visited, is probably the best way to say it.
At this time, I would like to lighten it up a little bit with a quick joke before we move forward. So, why was the alien reading a book on anti-gravity? Well, because he just couldn't put it down. So now, there's this thing called the Oz factor. If you have not heard of this, well, encyclopedia.com would define it as a term coined by UFOologist and author Jenny Randles, 1951. This refers to the experience of being isolated or transported by the real world of everyday life into another environment, which is quite similar to the real world, but changed enough to be noticeable and disturbing. During Randall's investigation of the UFO phenomena, there was a common thread of feeling disassociated from reality after UFO witness or abduction. This would be worked into a theory called the Oz factor. Particularly, there were feelings of a sense of timelessness, disrupted sensory input, paralysis, missing time, a dreamlike state, and other altered states of consciousness, which leaves the person with a feeling they had momentarily checked out of reality. There are countless cases, and I just like to discuss a couple of them. Now, the first case is from the summer of 1944. It was a hot, thunderous day during World War II in the village of Le Vernger, France. A 13-year-old girl, Madeline, would risk the many Germans and resistance fighters in the woods and bike out to pick some berries. But she didn't have to worry about the Germans and resistance fighters. She would be confronted by a strange object in the grass. The object was like a small car, but a dull gray. There was a small man standing by it, no more than 3 feet tall, and dressed in a brown one-piece suit. She felt afraid. She tried to run, but she was paralyzed and had no sense of time. Then, suddenly, the object, without any reason, was gone, and the hold on her disappeared. Now, the second case comes from the Staffordshire's ancient castle ring over in England, and this is told by Pauline Charlesworth. Now, this is a case you can take seriously, but not literally. This one kind of deals with, well, we'll get into that. This takes place on a summer day in July 1986, when her strange event occurred. She would work on Saturdays mostly, so on her regular day off was during the weekday, and she decided to plan a picnic up at the castle ring. Upon arriving, she set up a comfortable place. She stretched her blanket out, set up her meal. For over the next hour, she would eat her meal, drink whatever her drink was, read her book. Then something very curious would happen. Now, it was as if Pauline would explain this. She was within the confines of a vacuum, and all the surrounding noises around her just stopped, such as the blowing of the trees, the chirping of the birds, yada yada. So she would say this, that what was there wasn't quite right. The best way I can describe it is to say it was like I wasn't really on the chase, but it was as if I was in someone's dream of what the chase would look like, as if it were all a mirage, and it was a very good one, so it was very realistic to her. So this one kind of takes place more in the dream realm. So now, after reading about this Oz factor, I kind of thought that the night visitors fit into this category. Now, the couple did have trouble remembering details, so there was kind of a loss of time, and they weren't sure. There was a comment, they weren't sure if they were dreaming or if it was real. So that being said, something did happen to them and they did experience something, but was it real? Was it a dream? It's just something they can't explain. This has been a Dead Squirrel in the Woods Productions. This was edited and produced by me. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. For more info, you can go to our webpage. We are also available on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to come back for more episodes.